Everyone in Woodpine remembered the old Walters place. It stood crooked at the end of Sycamore Lane, like a hunched figure frozen mid-stumble. Most kids dared each other to run up and touch the rusted gate, but no one ever crossed it, not even on Halloween, especially not on Halloween. But in 1993, the year they say the veil between worlds was thinnest, 3 middle-aged friends, Tom, Brenda, and Simon, decided they were too old to be spooked by local legends. After all, they had grown up in Woodpine, knew every crack in the sidewalk, every whisper of wind that tickled the back of your neck. They weren't teenagers looking for thrills. They were just 3 friends looking to relive a bit of their youth. One last Halloween night before time and routine buried their spontaneity. It started as a joke over beers. "We should trick or treat one more time. Go out like we did when we were 12, Simon laughed, cheeks flushed. Brenda had hesitated but then smirked. "Only if we stop by the Walters house, just to prove it's all nonsense." Tom raised his glass. "Deal." They dressed as grown-ups trying too hard. Brenda in a dusty witch hat from her daughter's costume box. Simon in a vampire cape that didn't quite fit. And Tom as a skeleton with the paint flaking off. They laughed their way down the quiet lanes, scaring a few kids, collecting miniature chocolates they didn't plan to eat. When they turned onto Sycamore Lane, the air felt heavier. The fog rolled in without warning, clinging to the road like it didn't want them to go further. But they did. The gate moaned when Tom pushed it open. It sounded wrong, not metallic, more like a groan from something deep and alive. Brenda's voice was nervous but defiant. "It's just a house, a stupid house." They stepped into the yard. The grass was dry, dead, but oddly, no leaves covered it, though the trees above were nearly bare. Simon kicked a patch of dirt and jumped. "It's warm. The ground's warm. That's weird, right? It's October." Tom just grinned and headed to the porch. The door was slightly ajar. "We knock and go," Brenda whispered. "One knock. That's it," Simon said, glancing back toward the street. Tom knocked. There was no answer. Of course. But then came the sound. A rustle behind the door. Then footsteps. Slow, uneven. The door creaked open farther, revealing darkness. And then, light. A flickering candle somewhere deep inside. "Guys," Brenda breathed, gripping Simon's arm. "Did you see that?" Tom stepped forward. "Hello? Trick or treat?" No answer, but the candle flickered again, deeper inside. An invitation. "This is stupid," Simon muttered. "One quick look," Tom said. 5 seconds, and he stepped in. The air inside was thick and dusty, but it didn't smell abandoned. It smelled lived in, stale perfume, faint cinnamon. Something else underneath, rotting and sweet. "Tom!" Brenda called, stepping over the threshold. Simon followed reluctantly. The candle was at the end of a hallway that hadn't been there before. The house looked different inside than anyone remembered. Narrower, taller. They moved toward the light. Their footsteps sounded muffled like the house absorbed sound. The candle led them to a living room, or what might have once been one. Portraits lined the walls, dozens of them, but none with faces. Every canvas was smeared, blurred like the image had been wiped away violently. One portrait still had a hand, a woman's. It pointed directly at Brenda. "Let's get out," Simon whispered. But the front door was gone. Brenda turned in a circle. "It was right here. I swear it was right here." Then came the whispers, faint, hissing, all around them. Tom spun. "Did you hear that? They're saying something." Brenda moved closer to the smeared portraits. One of them shifted just slightly, as if breathing. "They're watching us," she whispered, and then screamed. From the shadows, a figure emerged, dressed like a trick-or-treater, mask, cape, tiny plastic pumpkin pail, but it was too small and too still, until it tilted its head. "That's a kid," Simon said, but no one moved. Not even the thing. Then more figures came, from hallways, from behind furniture, all small, all silent, all in Halloween costumes from different eras. 1920s clowns, 1950s cowboys, a 1970s astronaut, all still, watching. Then one stepped forward. It reached out a hand. The fingers were black, burned, cracked. "They never left," Tom whispered. "They never left this house." The whispers grew louder. Names, dates, please. Brenda backed into a wall and felt it give way. She tumbled into darkness, screaming. Tom and Simon followed her screams through a trap door that hadn't been there seconds ago. The staircase led to a basement too wide to fit beneath the house. Brenda lay in the center, surrounded by toys. Old, broken, dusty toys. A music box played somewhere. Off key. Wrong. "We're in their playroom," Simon muttered. "They brought us here." The whispering stopped. And then, laughter. Childlike. Giggling. But no joy in it. Only hunger. From the shadows, the costumed children came again. This time, their masks were gone. Empty sockets. Stitch-lined mouths. Faces not meant to be seen. A voice rose above the laughter. One not of a child, but of something older, wiser, crueler. "We were forgotten. Halloween came, and no one came to our door, so we stayed, waiting." The figures closed in. "Now you've come to our door, and you knocked. That means you agreed." Brenda sobbed. "We didn't mean to." "Doesn't matter. The rules are old. The game is older." Tom held up a handful of candy. "Take it. That's what you want, right?" The figure laughed. "You think we want candy?" Simon grabbed Brenda, pulling her toward the stairs. But they led only to a brick wall now. The house laughed. The walls laughed. Tom screamed as something grabbed his leg, pulled him backward into the dark. Brenda and Simon ran through endless hallways. Each turn led them back to the same room, where Tom's costume lay empty. Then, the front door, wide open. They didn't question it, they ran. They didn't stop running until they reached Brenda's car. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them looked back. Tom was never found. The Walters house was gone by morning, just a lot with dead grass. Every Halloween since, Simon and Brenda receive a knock at midnight. Just one knock. No one ever waits outside. Just a small plastic pumpkin on the step, filled with dirt, and the same candy Tom held in his hand. It all started with a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual letter. Thick parchment, hand-delivered, sealed with black wax in the shape of a crow. Alan Hartley hadn't received a letter like that since the 80s, and even then, it had never come with such an unsettling chill. The return address was from Wren Hollow, a forgotten cul-de-sac at the far edge of town. Tucked behind rusting train tracks and overgrown woods, no one walked through anymore. He almost threw it out. Almost. but the wording stopped him. A gathering of memories, a night of masks and meaning. Your presence is not requested, it is expected. It was signed simply, Eleanor. Alan hadn't heard that name in over 30 years. Not since the Halloween of 1979, when something had happened, something his memory refused to replay in full. Curiosity wrestled with dread. But curiosity, as always, won. The sun was setting when Alan drove past the last gas station, the October sky bruised with purples and oranges. He hadn't been back to Wren Hollow since he was a teenager. As he turned down the cracked road leading into the dead-end street, he noticed how time had strangled everything. Houses leaned like weary old men, yards were jungles. Streetlights flickered like dying fireflies. The last house, number 12, stood just as he remembered it. Tall, angular, almost Victorian, with shuttered windows and peeling white paint. It was Eleanor's grandmother's house, but Eleanor's grandmother had died, and Eleanor had vanished. Alan parked, heart thudding. The porch light blinked on as he stepped out. There was no one else there, no cars, no signs of life, just wind scraping dry leaves across the asphalt. Inside, the house was warm, too warm. The air smelled like dust and old perfume. A long hallway stretched forward, lit by flickering candles in antique sconces. Masks lined the walls, hundreds of them. Porcelain, wood, leather. Some were festive, others were not. One had a grotesquely stretched grin. Another had nails protruding from the cheeks. Alan's steps slowed. Then he heard it. Laughter, not children's laughter, but adult. Too loud, too close. He turned sharply, but the hall was empty. "Welcome, Alan," said a voice. He turned again. Eleanor stood at the end of the hallway, wearing the same witch costume she had the last time he saw her. Her face hadn't changed, not aged, not even a little. Alan froze. "You haven't aged a day," he whispered. She smiled. "Neither have you. Not yet." In the dining room, the table was set for 12. Crystal glasses shimmered, and silverware gleamed under the amber chandelier light. Other guests began to arrive. People Alan hadn't seen in decades. High school friends. The mailman from their old route. His childhood doctor. People who were dead. Alan stared, slack-jawed. You died in 91, he told Greg, his childhood best friend. Greg only smiled, raising his glass. The atmosphere grew denser. Laughter mixed with whispers, glasses clinked, but no one seemed to eat. Eleanor stood to make a toast. "Tonight we unmask the truth," she said. Her voice was deeper, darker. "For on Halloween, the veil thins, and debts must be paid." Everyone turned to Alan. He felt the weight of their stares, like physical pressure. "I don't understand," he muttered. "You will," Eleanor said. After dessert, they led him upstairs. The attic door creaked open, revealing a circle of chairs and a single television on a rolling cart. Eleanor pushed a VHS tape into it. Static filled the screen before revealing a grainy home video. Kids in costumes. A party. Screaming. Then the camera turned sideways, landing on Alan's young face. Laughing. Behind him, someone was convulsing. A girl in a black dress. Eleanor. Alan stumbled back. "No, that's not..." But it was. His memory had buried it. But it was real. He remembered the prank, the drink they spiked, Eleanor had fallen down the stairs. She'd stopped moving. They'd all agreed to say it was an accident. They'd buried the truth. And her. "But you died," he whispered. "You died that night." She nodded. And now we return to where it began. The room changed. The guests were no longer smiling. Their eyes were sunken, hollow, skin greyed, hands skeletal. They surrounded Alan, masks off. They weren't visitors, they were the dead. And they wanted him to remember everything, every lie, every silence, every moment they had suffered while he lived. Alan screamed, ran, downstairs through the hallway of masks. But the masks were watching him now. Eyes moving, mouths twitching. He burst out the door, but the street was gone. Just fog, endless fog. Eleanor stepped out behind him. "You were never meant to leave that night, Alan. None of us were. But you did. You tricked death," she said. "You passed the blame. We bore it. Now we pass it back." Her hand gripped his, cold, immovable. Alan looked at his reflection in the window. His face was different, younger, the same as in the video. Then he saw the others, in the glass, standing behind him. Alan's scream echoed through Wren Hollow, then silence. The house at number 12 stands empty again until next Halloween. It all began with a letter, an actual handwritten letter, sealed with wax and slipped beneath the door of James and Elena Whitmore's quiet home in suburban Connecticut. It was late October, the week before Halloween, and the air already had that crisp, spiced chill. James, a 52-year-old insurance adjuster with a cautious streak, frowned the moment he picked it up. Elena, ever the curious one, opened it eagerly. The letter invited them to a historical Halloween experience at the old Belgrave house on Wexley Street. It promised an immersive, adults-only evening, recreating a 1950s Halloween, complete with era-accurate costumes, decor, music, and surprises. The host was anonymous, signed only as "Your everlasting neighbour." Strange, yes, but something about the aged parchment and meticulous script intrigued them. After some convincing and a bit of wine, they decided it could be fun. Just one night. That night, James couldn't sleep. He kept glancing at the letter on the kitchen counter, uneasy about how the wax seal looked freshly pressed, like it had been sealed just minutes before they found it. Elena, on the other hand, was already searching online for vintage dresses and suits. No one online had heard of the Belgrave house. No pictures, no event page. Just a name. It was as if it existed only for them. Wexley Street wasn't far, just 4 blocks over, but no one could quite remember the Belgrave house. In fact, when James asked a neighbour, they said, "Wexley Street, isn't that where the old candy factory burned down in the 60s? Yet that night, under a full moon, there it stood, a perfectly preserved 1950s Victorian porch lit with orange bulbs, jack-o'-lanterns glowing like watchful eyes. The house was out of place, not just in style, but in atmosphere. It wasn't simply old, it was untouched, like a photograph brought to life. Elena squeezed James's arm. "Doesn't it feel like it's watching us?" she whispered. He chuckled nervously, but neither could shake the creeping chill up their spines. Still, they rang the bell. A man in a tuxedo and porcelain mask opened the door. "Welcome," he whispered. "You've arrived just in time." As they stepped inside, James glanced back. The neighbourhood looked different. quieter, darker. Even the moon seemed dimmer, as though the house had pulled the night into itself. Inside, everything was period accurate. Rotary phones, black and white TVs playing old horror films, a Victrola spinning eerie jazz. Guests milled about in stunning vintage attire, but something felt off. No one looked quite real. Their movements were stilted, their smiles too wide, their laughter too rehearsed. Elena leaned close to one woman and whispered, "Where did you find your dress?" The woman blinked once, then replied, "In the fire," before walking away. James laughed it off at first. "It's probably just a weird immersive thing," he said, but his voice cracked when one man offered him a drink, and the liquid inside was thick and red. "Just punch," the man said, then licked his lips a second too long. They noticed things were missing. There were no cell phones, no exit signs, no clocks. Elena reached for her phone to check the time, but found only static on the screen. Her settings were scrambled. Her flashlight flickered without reason. "I don't think this is a party," she murmured. "I think it's something else pretending to be one." At precisely 9:00 p.m, the host called for silence. "Let the games begin," he said, drawing open the velvet curtains in the main parlour. A girl stood in the centre of the room, maybe 8 years old, dressed as a witch. Her eyes were too dark, no whites. "Who wants to remember?" she asked. Everyone clapped politely, everyone except James and Elena. A shrill bell rang, the lights flickered, and suddenly the guests changed. Their skin grained, makeup melting to reveal burns, gashes, empty eye sockets. Screams filled the room, not just theirs, but echoes from distant time. "This house remembers what you forgot," the little girl hissed. "Now you'll wear your masks forever." James tried to grab Elena's hand, but it felt different, colder, thinner. He turned to her, only to see her face beginning to shift. She stared at him in horror, clutching her throat. "James, my voice, it's slipping." They ran, through a hallway that stretched too long, down stairs that spiraled endlessly. Every door opened to a different decade. One room was 1974, complete with a man hanging from the ceiling. Another was 1863, with a child crying in a burned crib. Elena screamed and pulled James into a narrow pantry, but it was no pantry. It was an oven, still warm. James banged on the walls until blood oozed from the seams. "This isn't a party!" Elena shouted. "This is a memory trap!" And then she stopped. A mirror stood at the back of the oven. In it, they were dressed in 1950s garb. Elena's mouth was sewn shut. James was missing his eyes. Desperate, they crawled through a hidden hatch that opened under the stove, revealing a crawl space filled with old shoes, torn masks and bones. Hundreds of bones, some still moist. When they stumbled into the attic, they found the truth. A charred newspaper pinned to a wall told of the Belgrave Halloween massacre of 1955. 13 guests burned alive in a party prank gone wrong. One survivor, a little girl named Clara, who vanished after. "Clara Belgrave," Elena whispered. "The witch." "Everyone here is dead," James muttered. "And we were invited." They understood too late. The letter wasn't an invitation, it was a summoning. And by stepping inside, they'd accepted a pact. Their presence fed the memory. Their fear kept the house alive. The girl appeared in the attic, floating, her hair swaying like it was underwater. "You wore the masks," she whispered. "Now you're mine." Her mouth opened wider than humanly possible. Screams poured out. Not hers, theirs. Echoes of all the trapped souls, begging to forget. They tried to burn it, rip the walls down. But the more they fought, the more the house absorbed them. Elena began repeating things she never said. James's hands bled, but left no marks on the door. They weren't guests anymore. They were part of the exhibit. At dawn, the house vanished. Wexley Street was empty. No Belgrave house, no footprints. Just one jack-o'-lantern rotting on the curb. A week later, another couple received a letter, handwritten, sealed with wax.